let's start with the AFC East, where I don't think, Josh, this is going to be a lot of controversy for who is going to be at the bottom of this division. I think me and you both generally agree it's going to be the New England Patriots. I have the Patriots, for the record, at 2-15, tied for the worst record in the National Football League. And that is regardless if Drake May starts, if it's Jacoby Brissett, if it's the kid Milton from Tennessee who's shown some flashes in the preseason. To me, and I've said it all off season, I almost feel bad for Gerard Mayo. I don't get it. And I would have gone with an offensive mind like Ben Johnson. I think New England is in a total rebuild. They have a couple nice running backs in Ramondre Stevenson. They have a okay slot receiver in that Douglas kid who popped a little bit last year, but not a ton of talent there. A lot of their talent's older on the defense side of the ball. I just think they're in a complete rebuild up there in Foxborough.
Shout out to my man Jesse Almeida. I've done a couple Boston Celtics versus Cleveland Cavaliers video collaborations with him. He's a huge Boston fan. So he's got the Patriots at the bottom going 4-13.
So you have them with 2 more wins than I do, because again, I have them at 2-15. So let me then reveal my full AFC East, Josh, and then I'll go to you. So in third place, this is where we may disagree on the rest of the division.
Okay.
In third place, I have just barely missing the playoffs at 9-8, the Buffalo Bills. I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back this year. Matt Milano, their great linebacker, got injured in preseason. They lost Tre'Davious White. They lost Jordan Poyer. They obviously traded away Stephon Diggs. I get they still have James Cook, and I really like Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. I think both those tight ends are going to have a really good year. But I think this team is still too Josh Allen dependent, and I don't think they're going to have the offense capable enough to win enough games to qualify for the postseason in the AFC. Though, again, I think they'll be there battling the last week of the season.
Okay. So
at number two, at 11-6, I have this team as a wild card team in the AFC, the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins, to me, it's a rinse and repeat from a year ago. They're going to get out to a fast start. They're going to struggle at the end of the season. They go to Green Bay. They go to Cleveland, and they go to the Jets in December. Those are 3 automatic losses to me on their schedule. I think Tua will have a good year. I think Tyreek Hill will have a good year. Jalen Waddle, all the offensive pieces. Defensively, they've lost a little bit, that they did gain Jordan Poyer from Buffalo. They did lose Vic Fangio. They're going to have a new defensive coordinator. But I just think the Dolphins have too much talent on the side of the ball that matters in today's NFL to not at least win games in 2024. And that leads to the number 1 team in the AFC East. And I've gone back and forth on it. I don't even feel confident in it, to be completely honest with you. But I've said it since March. They are now actually favored to win the AFC East. As of yesterday, I bet them when they were 3rd in the AFC East to win the division. Mr. Ayahuasca himself, Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets, who will win the tiebreaker with the Dolphins by defeating them in Week 18, being 11-6, having a better division record, and winning the AFC East. Brees Hall is back. They added Mike Williams, even though he may or may not play Week 1. Injuries be damned. He's a good number 2 complement to Garrett Wilson. The Hassan Reddick stuff, I don't even know if the Jets need him. I think their defense is just too good. And they won 7 games a year ago with Zach Wilson and Trevor Siemian and whoever the hell else was under center for that team. I think a healthy Aaron Rodgers. And by the way, they may lose Week 1 against San Francisco. Then their schedule gets pretty easy for the next few weeks. I think Aaron Rodgers and the Jets do finally win the AFC East for the first time since 2002.
Wow. All right. So I agree that the Patriots will finish last in the division. I actually have them going 5-12. So a little bit better of a record than you, but not much. So in third place, I have the team you predict to win the division, the New York Jets. I need to see Aaron Rodgers stay healthy. And when I just look at this roster, I get it. You said injuries be damned, but we know how much of a factor injuries play. And when I just look at the Jets roster, I'm just like, there's a lot of question marks there for me. And I'm not 100% sure if Robert Saleh is going to be there all season. Like,
Wow.
I'm not 100% sure. I I that seems like a bit of a shaky situation to me, just a bit. I'm I'm not saying he's going to get fired for sure, but I could see a scenario where that happens. So, in second, I've got the Buffalo Bills. And I'm going to agree with you, actually, that they missed the playoffs. Because, yes, they still have Dalton Kincaid, excuse me, and Dawson Knox. And they got Keon Coleman, the wide receiver out of Florida State. They got Shakir. They've got James Cook. But they lost a lot from their defense this offseason. And you saw in the playoffs and late into the season last year, when Josh Allen needed a big play, he either tried to do it himself or he went to Stephon Diggs. Well, Stephon Diggs is no longer there. So who's going to be that go-to guy for Josh Allen? That's a big enough question mark for me where I have him going 9-8 like you do and missing the playoffs. And then winning the division, those boys from South Florida going 11-6. I think Tua's going to finally put it together along with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and the Miami Dolphins win the AFC East.
Okay, so what do you have the Jets record at? Because I don't think you said that.
Okay, no. They did win 7 games with Zach Wilson and Trevor Siemian and whoever else was their quarterback. But I just look at their schedule. It seems a bit iffy to me when you look at some of their opponents because they have to play the NFC North, so they have to play Green Bay, I believe, right?
They have to play.
Let me double check on this, but I believe they play Green Bay, Minnesota, Chicago.
So they do play Minnesota. That I knew. They have to play the NFC West.
Okay, so they've got San Francisco, Seattle, the Rams. Those 3 are going to be tough teams, whether it's in LA, in Seattle. I know they're playing in San Francisco. I think the game against the Seahawks is in New York, but nonetheless, that's a tough draw. I could see them losing to both the Rams and the 49ers. So I'm going to give the Jets 8 wins. So I've got them just finishing under 500 at 8-9.
So pretty much, I'm higher on the Jets than you are. And we both agree Miami's going to get about 11 wins. I'm just higher on the Jets than you are. And that's really our main difference.
Yes. And the other main difference is I gave the Patriots 5 wins. You gave them 2.
So let's move on to the AFC West. In this division, I have 2 playoff teams. Coming up the rear at number 4, last in this division, the Las Vegas Raiders, who, in my opinion, it's weird. I sort of want to kind of like the Raiders. They have a great receiving core. Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Hunter Renfrow, Michael Mayer, Brock Bowers. They have great pass rushers. Christian Wilkins, who they got from Miami. You got Max Crosby. You got the kid Tyree Wilson they drafted a year ago. But I'm sorry, your starting quarterback is Gardner Minshew, who is going to have a defensive-minded coach. And I like Antonio Pierce. I think he's a good rah-rah guy. But he's not Shane Steichen. I don't see in any world where the Las Vegas Raiders are competitive in this division. I like their pieces, but I think it's going to get ugly quickly. I think Devontae Adams could ask out by the trade deadline, and I think the Raiders are going to fall by the wayside late in the year. I think they finish 4-13.
Okay.
In third, I have the Denver Broncos finishing 7-10. And this is, I'm not going to mention over-unders and betting because I know, Josh, you're not the biggest in the betting. But this one to me is significant because Denver's over-under is only 5.5. And I don't get it because they won 8 games last year with a guy who was cooked and let Russ cook and Russell Wilson. Now they bring in a guy out of Bo Nix who maybe is the most pro-ready, even out of a Caleb Williams, out of a Jaden Daniels. He's got Sean Payton. They have decent weapons. They even just cut Tim Patrick today, who I really liked as a number 4 wide receiver. Their offensive line was actually top 10 in the league last year. And to be honest with you, even though their defense doesn't have a ton of names anymore, if you watch Denver after they gave up 70 to Miami in week 3 last year, Van Joseph in that defense was middle of the pack the rest of the year. I'm just saying I don't think they're going to be awful. I think they're going to win games. I think they'll compete. I think Bo Nix will probably look about his ceiling, but I just think 5.5 games is way too low. I like Denver with the over, and I like Denver at 7-10.
Okay.
In second place, as the final wild card slot at 10-7, I have the Los Angeles Chargers. Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert, who I know he's been injured throughout the preseason. I get it. But Jim Harbaugh, we've seen his history. When he was at Stanford, he turned them around immediately. When he was with the Niners, he turned them around immediately. When he was at Michigan, he turned them around to a winning culture immediately. Then he finally won a national championship. I think receivers be damned. I think Lad McContry is going to be a real standout in this offense. They bring over Greg Roman, who was the offensive coordinator with not only Jim when he was in San Francisco, but John Harbaugh for the past few years in Baltimore. They bring over Gus Edwards. They bring over J.K. Dobbins. I think they're going to be a ground and pound football team. I think Harbaugh is going to bring a real grown-up. And there may not be a bigger upgrade this year than going from Brandon Staley as your head coach to Jim Harbaugh. So I have the Chargers at 10-7. And then obviously, until somebody takes them down in the division, I have Kansas City. I have them winning the division, though I will say a lot like last year, I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle, in the regular season. I don't have them getting the number 1 seed. I have them at 11-6, and I have the Chargers competing with them with the division for most of the season.
Okay. I have the Las Vegas Raiders winning the division. The Kansas City Chiefs are... No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Don't worry. Yeah, I have the Kansas City Chiefs at number 1. This is kind of obvious. They're the back-to-back Super Bowl champs. They've got Patrick Mahomes. They've got Travis Kelce. They've got Chris Jones. I believe they just re-signed Juju Smith-Schuster, so there you go.
They did.
And the Buffalo Bills stupidly made a trade with the Chiefs in the draft again. Not like that's hurt them before. And the Chiefs were able to go, hey, you're the fastest wide receiver in the draft, Xavier Worthy. We'll take you and give Patrick Mahomes another weapon. Yeah, sounds good. So I have the Chiefs winning one more game than you do at 12-5, but still winning the division. I think they end up with the number 2 seed in the AFC. Spoiler alert, the top seed in the AFC will go to a team out of the AFC South. But anyway, so, and then at number 2, I get what you're saying about the LA Chargers, but I do think the lack of wide receiver is going to hurt them a little bit. So instead, I'm going a mile high.
Wow.
I really like the pairing of Sean Payton and Bo Nix together. It reminds me of when Sean was in New Orleans and Drew Brees was in his prime. We saw how well that pairing was, especially when uh, Drew Brees had Marcus Colston, Jeremy Shockey, Pierre Thomas, Reggie Bush. I'm not saying the Broncos are going to go win the Super Bowl or anything, but I see comparisons between them, if you will. So I actually have the Broncos sneaking into the playoffs at 10 and what would that be?
10-7.
10 and 7. Yes.
You may be the only person in the country who has that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just telling you flat out.
I could see it logistically happening. I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Broncos. And it's interesting. You mentioned Vance Joseph, their defensive coordinator. I guarantee you a lot of people were calling for his head after that 70-point bombshell.
I could tell you personally they were, because if you recall, the day after that game, I was in Denver, Colorado, and I was listening to Denver Sports Talk Radio, and that was what they were talking about.
So, but then, as you said, the Broncos defense really turned it around, and they put themselves in a position to possibly make the playoffs last year with a washed up Russell Wilson, who the Broncos just said, yeah, bye. And you look at their skill position player, you said it, they cut Tim Patrick, but they still have Cortland Sutton, who's a very good wide receiver. I wouldn't say great wide receiver. I'd have to look up the rest of their skill position group, but he's the main guy that stands out. And yes, they traded Jerry Jeudy to us this offseason, so we'll gladly take him. But we know Sean Payton finds a way to develop wide receivers. So yes, I have the Broncos going 10 and 7, sneaking into the playoffs. In third place, I have the Chargers just missing the playoffs, like the Jets at 9 and 8. And then, in last place, I've got the Las Vegas Raiders at 7 and 10.
See, wait, you got the Raiders at 7 wins.
Yeah.
So you got that being a very competitive division then.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are saying, it's not going to be that great of a division. But look at how Antonio Pierce turned the Raiders around late in the season last year. I get it. Gardner Minshew, he's a bit of a journeyman. He's kind of become the new Ryan Fitzpatrick. But again, you mentioned like the auditions they've made this offseason. They added Christian Wilkins to pair with Max Crosby. They still have Devontae Adams. They added Brock Bowers to go alongside Michael Mayer. So I bet you see a lot of two tight end sets. They still have I believe they cut Hunter Renfrow, if I'm not mistaken.
They might have. You might be right on that.
But I think this, and yes, they lost Josh Jacobs, but I just don't think they're going to have as big of a fallout as people think. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a more competitive division.
I'm very interested now to see who you have record-wise, the worst record and where it stands. Because New England at 5 and Vegas at 7, I had those two teams a little bit lower on the totem pole.